Ladies and gentlemen, welcome into Jackrabbit Illustrated Late Night with the Borg. Thanks for joining us, all you crazy degenerates. As always, Jackrabbit Illustrated is brought to you by the Kubota Dealers of South Dakota with the 10 locations across this great state. There's always a dealer near you to get into some orange equipment today, some of the most reliable equipment on the market. They've got everything for your needs, from UTVs or side-by-sides to skid steers to anything you may need for your home, farm, ranch, or acreage to take care of anything you got to get done around there, from throwing snow to everything else. So thank you to Kubota Dealers South Dakota for being our title sponsor. Of course, I'm here with the man, the myth, the legend of Dakota News Now, Zach Borg, and we would like to also thank our our show sponsor, Jackrabbit Central of the SIU bookstore fame, with location downtown, online, as well as the location obviously on campus, and then the one in the stadium. They're the place to go for all of your Jackrabbit gear and memorabilia you may want. Go to the bookstore, get yourself hooked up with some sweet stuff like my hoodie I got here. They've always got the discount den. Touchdown Tuesday is going to be banging. That'll be a full discount after today's butt whooping that was laid out. So enjoy it, Alex. Glad you're checking in, buddy. We'll see how long you last too, for sure. But yeah, I don't know. Zach, you were there. I saw you there. You've had a busy week with the high school title games and everything else. I mean, you surviving over there.
Yeah, I had to go back down to Vermilion at halftime. Could have done with maybe some more interesting highlights than the 1 yard, the runs weren't bad. I was kind of hoping for a bomb touchdown or two, or one of those giant. Right away that Wildy touchdown getting wiped off kind of pissed me off with the refs. Of course, everybody was kind of upset with them for throwing Adam Bach out on the first play of the game. Guess that was good. When are we ever happy with referees anyway in this line of work? But just kind of a workman-like game. I don't know. It wasn't quite Murray State, but it still didn't feel like the energy was quite there in the crowd. I think everybody kind of knew what was coming, and but nonetheless, they just took care of business. I mean, the first quarter. I mean, the kind of long drives. I mean, I kind of look at the drive chart here that I got in front of me. Because the first quarter really flew by. I'm like, you just looked up and you're like, oh, we're already done with the first quarter. It was like, the whole thing just really went quick. And then in the second quarter, they just pretty much put the hammer down. I mean, credit Nick Hill for kind of at least knowing what he was up against, and didn't start with a 10-minute. To be fair, last week I didn't really get a chance to watch much of that game because I was at the Key of the City USF Augie game. So I think Big Thumpy had a few more drinks in him last week too, which was entertaining.
Drinks into me,
which was entertaining.
Healthy amount of drinks in me that game. I've got none today, so that's a whole different thing.
Well, you had some drinks this morning when you were going on a rant about the Mountain West, which we can get into later, but or was it last night?
That was last night into today. That was why I didn't drink.
A little bit of both.
I had enough last night.
But no, I mean, goodness, I mean SDSU had they had one punt, I guess, which I kind of forgot they punted in that game because it seemed like they scored every possession. They had the football, but yeah, I mean, just kind of a downer. Maybe that sucked some of the energy out of the crowd too when Bach got thrown out. But you gotta it's also kind of weird because even though it's senior day, it's not really, because they're going to get at least one more, probably maybe two more home games, maybe three if things, depending on what happens. I mean, maybe they get a better seed than we think, depending on what happens with NDSU. Maybe there's an upset, who knows? But so it's always kind of weird because I'm like, it's not really senior day. But, there's more pomp and circumstance, certainly in the beginning. We've been having this. I know SDSU's had this. There's been a lot of issues with USD as well in the last couple of years. The best thing I'll say about it is at least it happened early, so you don't lose them for the Missouri State game, which obviously Mo State had a little bit of a problem today. I still think that game could be a little bit of a trap or difficulty just because it's on the road. I don't know what kind of crowd Missouri State's going to have next week for that game. But we'll see. But at least you don't lose Bach for a half of that. At least at least they threw him out early, and you don't have to deal. Because I hate that whole thing where you throw him out in the third quarter and he's got to miss another half of the next game. That's stupid. But yeah, I'm not really counting on that. Not after the Grizz were down 3-0 to whooping cough at half today in Washington Grizzly and only won by 11. So crazier things could happen, but I'm not really. The best way that SDSU could get into a 2 seed would probably be, if USD won, and then if USD beats NDSU next week. That's the only way I think they could get up to a 2 seed. Or if obviously they're on the Bobcats side and the Bobcats get eliminated before a semifinal meeting. We'll see. Obviously, it's all going to come down to next week. And, yeah, I think Montana State's going to be favored pretty heavily, but you never know. Like I said, you never know with the brawl, but, man, just the Grizz just do not look like it. Bobby Hawk looked like he was once again he's got some kind of thing going on with his quarterbacks where he keeps arguing with that transfer kid. I don't know what that deal is. It's just kind of a really weird vibe they're giving right now. As much as McDowell didn't necessarily look like a world beater when he played SDSU, I think they really miss him over there. Obviously, he's out for the year now. He suffered a year-ending injury, but that was a weird situation where, it seemed like they almost kind of ushered him out at one hand, but then I don't know. They really miss him, I think. But like I said, for the Jackrabbit game, we've kind of gone in a few different directions here. Just very workmanlike effort. I also hate that they flagged Voorhees for that thing. I'm sure Jimmy was not happy with that either, but whatever. I don't understand why I don't know. It's like the referees were calling this game like these were two chippy teams, and I don't think SIU. I think the sooner SIU could get out of here, probably the better in their eyes. So, yeah, you got what was the final today with Kentucky? I didn't see that.
It was not what you would think. It wasn't. It took Kentucky scoring 2 touchdowns in the fourth to make it 48-3. I think.
Yeah, I thought it was like 24-0 at half. I'm like, this game's better than the USD and SDSU games.
6:48. It was.
Yeah.
It was better than any of the Top Valley games. So, honestly, Mike, I mean this sincerely. That was a solid performance when they needed to score twice in the fourth quarter to make that score. That's that, and to me, that does show a sign of improvement for Murray almost. I'm telling you, but
yeah, but
they always cover in Kentucky. He says, I do gotta say, I know, especially after the second half, it felt workmanlike. But man, you put up 500 plus yards of offense. You hold the other team under 250, and we know Southern Illinois isn't great. We know their offense is bad. They can't run the ball.
A lot of it's injury related right now. Jake Curry, who they started, he was a fourth string guy. He was a true freshman. He should not be out there, but they've had a number. And I'd last seen them during the USD game. They had a different backup at that point. They still got run out of the Dakota Dome. They've had 2 other backups get hurt. And I think this other guy, Lindauer, he was like a GA. And now he was thrown out there, and he did a little bit better than Curry. I feel for Nick Hill. Like I said, we've talked a little bit about how the Valley is down. I do think SIU will bounce back next year as long as they don't have everybody and their mother get hurt. But yeah, this is a little bit of an outlier because you're not going to win with a true freshman and all the injuries they have right now in this league. But yeah, continue where you're at.
I was really happy with it being senior day. Mark was on, and this is another game where national guys look at the stats. They're going to go, oh, well, it was only 185 yards. Yeah, it was 185 yards.
Half, basically.
One half. He averaged 17 yards roughly a pass play per completion. long of 32. He was on with the vast majority of his throws. Had some receivers making tough catches when they got popped, when they caught the ball. That's a huge improvement for me to see. But I was really happy to see Amar really pop off this game. I mean, he had, let's look, total yards, 157 rushing yards plus another 39 receiving yards. I mean, he had himself a day. That's almost 200, offensive yards in the game. 2 touchdowns, averaged 11.2 yards per carry. Really got to have a day, which is great on senior day. I really think he deserves it. I do think with as explosive and successful as Angel has been, I think sometimes we do take for granted a little bit Amar and how good he is. Yeah, Ogorski, he's the one who hung on to that. Hung on to the one where he got popped.
To be fair, I've misspelled that guy's name too a few times, but we're gonna know it. I have a feeling, assuming he's here for 4 years, we're gonna know his name pretty well by the end of it.
Yep, he's here. You got him. You got Wildy in theory next year.
Don't forget about Maxwell Woods. June.
Yep.
We may know his name and that's another thing too. I would expect we're going to see him next week potentially against Missouri State. Yep. He's only played the 3 games. He can get the 4th. We could see him in the playoffs because there's no limit once you hit the playoffs. That 4-game thing's out the window. So they can use any freshman they want, and it doesn't affect their eligibility moving forward.
And Jimmy's pretty much said as much on his coach's show that, we're going to use him for one more game. And then in the playoffs, you're going to see more Maxwell Woods than you have. And that's just being smart. I mean, I don't see why you wouldn't do that. So that's something to look forward to. I mean, total rushing yards gained was 302 if you take out the sack from a couple John losses. Bell. 300 yards rushing, not a bad day.
Brendan Begeman had about 30, almost had 40 yards on.
Yep. Yep. He had, if he didn't have one run for a loss of 3, he would have averaged 4 yards a carry. Got everybody in there again. You got the backups, a lot of play. John Bell, he got some run out there, which was good.
I'll say this too. I'm very glad they took Gronowski out early. Yeah, I think Bell was in there. I don't think I left, but when I was listening on the radio, I think Gronowski was basically out. Did he even get a series in the second half?
He did one. They ran one series with him in the second half. He ran the opening series, and that doesn't surprise me with it being senior day.
Well, just like I said, who knows? I mean, my guess is there still might be one more blowout in the playoffs because they'll, if they win next week, they're probably. I mean, they could be anywhere from 2 to 3 to 4. So you never know, but probably they're going to have a very winnable first round game. They could, or second round game technically,
especially with the seeding of the top 16 now.
Yeah. So, I always, that's always kind of I hate to be the armchair quarterback on that because every coach is different, but the sooner you can get a guy out in a game where you're killing a team when you have bigger things ahead, the better. And hopefully we'll see Mr. Mason back pretty soon. Again, I don't know for certain. A lot of what I've heard is it's not that serious. I think I've heard the ankle, whatever the leg injury was. They didn't really need him for the last 2, needless to say. We'll see. Maybe they bring him back maybe they'll bring him back for Missouri State. If not, give him 2 weeks rest. Get him. Yep. You need him for the playoffs. I think that's the most important one. See Garrett saying maybe Tarleton State. I don't know if you want Tarleton that early. They're a bit of an outlier. I'm curious about them there.
Well, they lost to Abilene Christian today in a close game. When you talk about some teams from other conferences, there's teams that are like the Furmans and stuff that I truly believe are very, very nationally good teams. And there's also very good teams that once they match up with the top 4, it you can see the gap, I guess. I mean, look at Incarnate Word. I mean, they had a tough game this week and almost lost to Stephen F. Austin, which is not impressive. But realistically, besides them, they've been getting ranked as a top 10 team. I'm not sure they're top 10, but that's top 25 team, beat them by 21, right? So some of these games, just because if you watch SDSU blow them out of the water, it doesn't mean they're a bad team. Right. It's just SDSU right now is in a, I mean, not as dominant year as last year, is still very, very, very good compared to a lot of teams. And that doesn't mean those teams aren't good. That's just the heights that the program is at right now. And it was, but also it was really good to see Matt Durant's get 2 INTs. It was the first time in 3 years, I think they said on the radio, that one player has gotten 2 interceptions in a game. And I would imagine the last one had to have been Dallas Beanham to do that.
Yeah, I was gonna say I want to look at the replay here because I had the highlight. I showed its first one in the sportscast because pro tip for any aspiring broadcasters: 1-yard touchdown runs are not very interesting, especially when their quarterback sneaks. Nothing personal, Mark Gronowski, if you're watching, but it's just not really a compelling video. So getting to give Mr. Durant some love there was kind of a nice thing, but. Got to give a shout out because somebody tipped the first one. Curry had some pressure on him. So I'm going to pull up the video here. I'm in the process, by the way, if you see me looking away.
I like that name, Dan. The Durantula. Yeah, nice. That's fun. I like that. I love that.
That's the process of posting my video here. So I want to see who got it because somebody got a hand on, somebody got their arm, was rushing, got their arm on the quarterback, and that popped the ball up a little bit.
On the shoulder.
It's 55. Yep, got him on the shoulder soon. Who is 50? Look at 55. That's not Wolfcastle Holstein, is it? 55? Because they've got so many guys on it. They rotate so many dudes.
It's Wolfcastle Holstein.
Pulled that one out. No,
Gilbert,
Claiborne's Arizona. 94. I know that one because I've been pumping the air on that dude's tires since I saw him in camp. But yeah, that's
the other thing that I think was
pat on the head for that. Right. Give myself a pat on the back for randomly knowing one of the longest and best names on the team and associating the number there. Yeah, I just
I was gonna say
I thought he was maybe in the 90s.
With the crowd, it wasn't super loud, but for late November, not.
As many problems as they used to have getting people in for senior day, and
yes.
I think a few weeks ago, considering a few weeks ago, there were still a lot of seats left.
The students haven't been showing up haven't really showed out in the last 2 games, which is weird. So and hopefully that changes when playoffs come around and that's more exciting and all that stuff.
It better because they're usually they're the most reliable ones in the playoffs usually. Although there's usually good deals for them too.
Right. The students are the straw that stirs the drink, when it comes to that. And honestly, and I'm not ragging on the student section. I give them a pass on these games because they've been phenomenal this year. I don't know. I wasn't, it's hard for me to gauge the crowd when I sit on the east side, if that 17,268 is legit or not. But that being said, I think today was a huge success because there were, ticket deals, some tickets that, different people were able to hand out to organizations and stuff like that. And a lot of people getting people who were, probably don't come to many games to come. I know I had a dozen people that we got into the game that had either don't come to very many games or were neighbors. And through that before, I've got now 2 sets of neighbors who almost exclusively come to late season games and playoff games, which is kind of unique. It's not something you would expect, especially from bringing in new fans. You wouldn't think, oh yeah, they're going to come to all the cold games, but that's how that's worked out for me. So I'm just putting that out there for, you never know. And Ariel went around and asked them, and they started showing up for games and had a great time. I think we had 8 people show up that had never been to SDSU's campus before. And one of them is looking at going to SDSU just as a student. He had a blast and loved it, and his whole family loved it. And that's something that pays dividends over time, even though, it wasn't the best game. Excitement wise, it is fun. It's still fun to go watch them absolutely pummel somebody. It is entertaining, and it might not be the most excited crowd, but I think maybe some of that is you had a lot of people there who don't normally go. And your people who do go to a lot of these games are used to being loud. And if you're your first time at a game, you're a little reserved. You don't want to be a loud, obnoxious person in your section, things like that. I'm just throwing that out there as a possible thing, but I do think it was a really good showing. Crowd wise,
I feel like we kind of make. I don't know. I feel like somebody mentioned this to me last week. I think it was an SDSU fan actually, that maybe we make too much of the attendance stuff. And sometimes it was right, because last week I knocked Augie a little bit, and Augie got knocked a little bit last week because their side was half full for one of the biggest games in their program's history. And somebody, Brexton's mentioning it, that USD is perplexingly having problems right now. That's crazy. There was 1,200, and I know I've been talking with Coyote fans, the diehard ones who are just like, basically at the point where they want to throw their hands up, and they're like, well, there's nothing more we can do at this point. If people aren't going to come out. It's just, I don't, where they, it's like, were you that upset that they lost a 3-point game in overtime to SDSU that you're not going to show up for a game which would easily be as important? I don't know. We can talk about that in a minute, but yeah, the long story short, because inevitably when you start talking attendance at one, I mentioned the Augie thing last week. I just kind of innocently said, hey, I've been critical of SDSU and USD when I felt like there was a moment. So I've, basically kind of using that to preface that, hey, I've been critical of both sides when I've just, I haven't had an agenda. When I use that to make the preface, and then right away, somebody from SDSU thought I was ripping them and wanted me to start getting on the train about, why isn't USD? I'm like, guys, I'm not trying to start the USD SDSU thing here. I'm just saying Augie didn't. I'm a little disappointed that Augie didn't have a bigger crowd, and he kept going with it. And I'm like, nope, not doing it.
I'm out.
So I'm like, so again, I don't really like doing the attendance shit, because I do recognize every place has unique problems. Even NDSU, who is in a 250,000 metro area or radius, whatever you want to, population. So they have less excuses, in my opinion. But it's just it's a different deal when you have 2 Division I universities that are not in their biggest cities' populations. You have to have them commute, and they're both competing for the largest city, which is to the south, which is basically about an hour, 45 minutes, an hour away. There's just a lot of different factors. It's different than it was, which is ironic, because you go back to the old films of the 80s and 70s and even the 90s. Those places used to, for what they were in the smaller eras, be pretty packed, even if the teams weren't that good. There's more entertainment options now for staying at home if you want to. And I think that directly affects attendance sometimes at Augustana, certainly at Sioux Falls, because I mentioned that Augie USF game. Yeah, USF packed the Augustana end, but you go to a lot of USF games and they struggle for attendance at Bob Young Field. So there's a lot of attendance issues, and it goes beyond who you cheer for or what you think of your rivals. There's a lot of attendance and right now SDSU is at a peak right now, because won national championships. The interest is higher than ever. We've of course had our Bison friends warn us, well, what happens if you guys get bored with, that could be a thing eventually. I think one of the things SDSU has done a better job of, a little bit more so than certainly more so than USD. I think they're trying to catch up, is the overall experience, the ambiance. I know Matt Zimmer would reference this last few years ago. I think last year, it's like sometimes you feel like there's a party atmosphere in the stands with some of the things they're doing in terms of the, I don't know, all the promotions, but it seems like they're playing the music or the pick a tune or whatever. So it's like there's stuff going on where you don't have to be fully engaged with the game if the game is not a, if it's not an NDSU game, or it's not like what we had a few weeks ago with USD where it was just that riveting. I think maybe that is something when you look up north with what the Bison have had, you wonder, is it just because again, a lot of us, we are the diehards. I'm a Chiefs fan. I'm going to be riveted to the freaking game. There's a lot of people who go to those games. They need more than that. They're not necessarily, they're there for more than that. So, I think SDSU's done I'm sure SDSU, you can speak more to this than me because we all know the Bison just kill it with tailgating. I think that's one of the big things that, where they really, if anything, people go for the tailgates maybe more so than the games there, with the way things have devolved with the FCS and with everything there. But maybe that's where SDSU is still, even USD's tailgating is pretty good because they've got everything around the dome. Similar things happen with D-Days. I think, you could probably fit twice the dome in on a D-Days, and then they don't get nearly as much during the game. So, like I said, if SDSU could improve anything, it'd be finding a way probably to improve the tailgate. If you could get the tailgate anywhere near what NDSU has. But yeah, I think maybe that's the biggest thing SDSU has going is their game day experiences. Even if the games are a blowout, I think they have enough that they're keeping people engaged beyond just what's going on the field. Because, I think this program was kind of so mid-level, mediocre, I'm not necessarily mediocre, but it was just it was at best in its Division II era, a 7-8 win program. You had to kind of find I think they maybe figured out that you have to probably find other ways to keep people engaged if it's not, if the games aren't that riveting. So, kudos to them. I think they've done that.
Yeah, we've said it for a while that when SDSU was struggling with attendance and everything, that you need to make game day an event. And it's the whole day. That's where tailgating comes into play. That's why it's a big deal. And that has been growing year after year after year after year after year at SDSU. All over the place. More and more people go, have fun, are more invested in it. And if you're invested in your tailgate setup, then you're going to use it because you got a bunch of money in that. You don't want it just sitting around. That's a thing. And you're going to take as much advantage of it as you can and everything else. So, it's all come together really well at SDSU so far. Obviously having one of the top facilities in the country helps. And make no bones about it. Pure facility wise, just not facilities. And I know I'm going to get jumped by NDSU fans when I say this. I'm not talking facilities. I'm just talking the stadium itself, not the environment, just the stadium. The Fargo Dome and the Dakota Dome are not tops in the country for a viewing experience, fan experience, that sort of thing. They just aren't.
Well, past that renovation, if you believe that facility's that good. I mean,
right. Yeah, they keep going. There's a reason they keep wanting to renovate, and it's because it needs it, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. It's still a great place to go watch a game. I'm not saying it's awful. It's not my favorite. And that's beyond, me, the rivalry.
Every facility. I mean, I it's funny because I just randomly fittingly on YouTube, because I know we're streaming on. I think we're streaming on there too. I saw this randomly. It was a pretty good documentary from KMSP out of the Twin Cities on when the North Stars left Minneapolis, and they had I think toward the end where they mentioned that, oh, by the way, the XL Energy Center is due for renovations because it's now 25, 24 years old, and they're like, oh, we'll see if they pony up for that. Because, hey, remember what happened when nobody wanted to put any money into the Met?
Mhm.
It's like somebody mentioned that, every 20, it's just kind of an inevitable thing. Every 20, 30 years, you probably got to renovate a place, no matter how new it seems or still is. And the Fargo Dome really, you got a new video board, which is very nice. It's gotten new turf, but man, it needs a lot of work. And it's not, again, you pack it in there, it gets hot, you get a lot of fans in there. And especially if they're going to do this FBS move at some point, I mean, it's not a requirement to move up. I mean, the FBS, I think, used to have attendance requirements, but they got rid of that a while ago.
Yep.
So they don't need that's a common misconception that you need a new stadium or you need a certain capacity or you need to be drawing a certain amount. I mean, look at Kennesaw State. They're not and that was like a soccer stadium. They still play in, but like I said, they still need work on that place because especially if they believe that FBS is going to solve every fan apathy issue and they're going to get all these fans coming back to the games because now they're not going to have blowouts, which, by the way, there are still going to be a lot of blowouts because the new Mountain West is probably going to suck a lot for a lot of teams. So there still are going to be a lot of blowouts, and that apathy will continue. Just my little prediction there. And that will could continue if SDSU joins, by the way. So, but like I said, either way, we'll get into that later. But yeah, I mean,
I do want to address this since we're wandering now, and there's only so much to go over with this SIU game. They're asking what are my thoughts on we got asked by Blazer Bobcat, who's joining us from Albany, Georgia.
Yeah, I saw Mercer.
Yep, FCS Fans Nation YouTube. Thanks for joining us, you degenerate. It's even later there for you.
We're gonna have a lot next week. I have a 1
a.m. Yeah. It'll be real spicy next week when we really, really get into the nuts and bolts of this. For Mercer, I mean, they're going to get the auto bid now. I mean, I guess I can't say for certain that that's locked up yet, but I mean, looking at the records here, boy, sure looks like they will. And probably, yes, maybe between I would say probably 7 to 5 range. It'll be curious to see what happens. I mean, we don't know what happens. We'll see in the polls what happens, but we don't know how the committee is going to treat a UC Davis that just lost by throwing an interception on a 2-point conversion against Montana State at home.
Wild game that was.
Where boy, they did a lot of things to give that game away. If Zach McKinnell's saying they probably get the 5 seed, the man knows his business about the whole FCS, so I'm going to lean that way. I see anywhere from 7 to 5, depending on how everything shakes out, what sort of credit UC Davis gets for that game.
I guess the question is, if USD loses to NDSU next week,
right?
Do you really see Mercer ahead of US?
Yes, I do.
I guess you have to, but
who has USD beat? That's ranked.
That's a fair point.
They haven't beat it, and that is something that.
I remember
this UND game was so important for them to win.
Yeah, Sam Herder had them as a bubble team if they lost when they were down. Which is it is hard to believe because you do the eye test and they seem fine,
right?
Because obviously they played Wisconsin well. They were a play or two from beating the Jackrabbits up here, and unless they just get run over by the Bison next week, even if they lose that game and it's a close game, if they lose that game and it's something like what happened up in Brookings, eye test wise, I think they should be at least seeded. But they don't have the.
Honestly, if you look at it right now, outside of having an easy non-con schedule with an FBS game, which they had a very easy non-con schedule. Even if they do play Portland State, nobody's calling it a tough non-con schedule. If you say you replace their non-con with, say, was Montana State and Davis, and they lost both of those games close, this would be you and I. We'd be talking about you and I. This is what you and I used to do. They wouldn't have any real signature wins. They'd play really tight against the top teams in the Valley, maybe sneak a win occasionally, and then you'd be like, we know they're good. We know they're good, but their resume makes it tough. And I think that's the position that USD's in, where they won't have they'll probably be like Alex said, they'll probably be 7 to 12 range for seeds, which isn't bad, but they're just in a tough spot. It's happened to SDSU before, where you go and lose a tough game. You lose your tough games, you lose them close, then it really bites and it's hard. That's tough, because there's not enough substance in the Valley this year outside of those two teams when you don't get to play Missouri State to build any resume off of, and it makes it hard for them. So that's kind of a bummer for them. Just quickly, I'm going to go back and address this. The SoCon, they just screwed themselves this week. They're just the SoCon, and I'm so sick and tired.
SoCon.
Sick and tired of that phrase. SoCon gonna SoCon. It's so tough because we play everybody. No, don't lose to 2-win teams. Don't lose to 2-win teams. Don't lose the 3-win teams. That's not SoCon gonna SoCon. It's called.
I mean, do we even have to put a rant clock on this? It's pretty simple.
Yeah, pull your head out of your ass and win the games you're supposed to. Well, we play everybody, so that no, shut up. That's not true. That is
Furman should have been a semifinal team last year, but they blew it in the last game to was that a winless or a 1-win team? Doesn't matter.
Yes. Like,
I know they had a backup
themselves.
I think they had a backup quarterback in that game. I don't care.
Yeah.
If South Dakota State or North Dakota State were playing their third string quarterback and they were playing the 1-win Valley team, so that would be the equivalent. I don't know if the Murray State guy is still on here, so I apologize. But that would have been the equivalent of South Dakota State or North Dakota State going to Murray or Western Illinois, who was in the league at the time, saying, oh, well, we don't have Mark Gronowski or Cam Miller. I guess we're going to lose.
Right.
They would beat those teams by 30.
Yep.
They'd probably beat those teams by 20 with their third string quarterback. So,
well, and it's the thing here where
sorry, Michael. That's just where you guys are at right now.
Yeah.
But just be honest. Like if you're telling me SDSU or North Dakota State has a must-win game to get a high seed in the playoffs, but their quarterback is out, that's a game they're going to win no matter who their quarterback is. If they're truly, 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 truly one of the 4 best teams in the country, not just in their conference, not in their region, the country. And that Furman team was legitimately really good. I mean, they came really, really close to going them on. I mean, the refs kind of got jobbed a little bit in Missoula, but newsflash, that's what happens on the road.
Yeah.
You don't get the calls. Referees tend to, if there's a big crowd, as tends to be in the Fargo Dome or Missoula, because I know that's always a big SoCon. Well, we always have to go to Fargo. Well, yeah, they always are going to get they're probably going to get a few more calls because referees tend to lean a little toward the home crowd. So, I mean, it just is what it is. You got to take care of business so you can get the home games. You can't lose to a 1-win team or a 2-win team. This is why they have not been to a semifinal since Georgia Southern and all the charter members left.
And I agree with Zach McKinnell. He says, I agree with you, but I think the problem is the same energy isn't kept with some other conferences. Example, Montana losing to Weber State. I agree completely. There are certainly certain programs that get a lot of leeway, just historically based off of name recognition and everything. 100% agree with that. I come at it from the perspective of an SDSU fan. Before we had these shirts, before we could buy these shirts, right? Before then, what happened? What did they call it when SDSU did what ETSU did today? They call it, SDSU pissed one down their leg. Nobody was saying, oh, well, it's because they play every team in the Valley. No, nobody said that. It was SDSU should have won that goddamn game, and they didn't. And guess what? They got punished for it. Guess what? They never won a national title then because they kept getting worse seeds and going on the road a bunch. And that was the road that they made for themselves. And eventually we realized, hey, this isn't somebody else's fault. This is our fault because we keep dropping these games. Mark Gronowski came in, and this team stopped doing that. And guess what? National titles happen. We get all these excuses from SoCon fans that, oh my God, it's the regionalization. And that's why we can't get to the semis. And we don't get as easy a first round games. Your first round game is not what's keeping you from the semifinals, buddy. That's not it. What's keeping you from the semifinals?
They've had some close calls. They've had close calls. But yeah.
Furman's not at Montana if they don't drop that game last year. Montana might be at Furman instead, and then Furman wins that game. I have no doubt in my mind, as opposed to what Grizz. And it's just exhausting. It really is, because I want I want the SoCon to do well. I genuinely believe it is a better conference than the CAA. The CAA is absolutely they're gutted. They're shell themselves.
What was that? You remember the scene where they were at Braveheart, where they took the thing and yeah, that's basically the CAA anymore.
Yeah, and they're leaning on these records.
That visual.
Yeah, right. That's okay.
I don't know why that popped into my head, but
we're on with the D-gens. It's all right. But no, we I truly believe the SoCon's better than the CAA, but stop killing yourself here. It's like they have a 3-4 programs in this conference between Chatty and Western and ETSU and whoever pops up who just can't stop stepping on their dicks. And now the SoCon is allowing the CAA to get better seeds than them, and allowing that stupid bloated conference of NEC and everything else cast-offs that they've tried to pull in to replace everything. And like, God damn it, stop giving them that. Like, that it frustrates me, because I want the SoCon to rise to what it once was. And we know there's programs there who can do it. Furman, for example, was a power back when App State and Georgia Southern were. So like, we know they can find it. Wofford was really good for a long time. We know these programs are capable. It's driving me nuts watching them not take advantage when they're in position to become that again. They keep killing themselves. It drives me nuts. And if you want the only argument, I think that we play everybody, if you want to point that at, I guess the CAA, sure, that's fine. There's a lot of dodging of top teams, and once a year there's one team in the Big Sky that'll get to dodge everybody else, but everybody else has to play top teams. We don't use this excuse for the Big South OVC. It drives me crazy. Listen, shut up, Alex. Goober. But boy, it's gonna be. Oh, me and Kevin get along great. I love to razz Kevin. I didn't say Socklukis once all show just for Kevin. Well, now I said it, so now it's gonna annoy him, which is kind of fun for me. I like to twist his tail sometimes. But no, the USD thing now. I mean, and I don't know how much you paid attention to that game, Borg.
That was interesting.
I didn't get to obviously watch a lot of it because I was at the SDSU game and tailgating and doing everything else.
Yeah, I mean, it started a little earlier than even earlier than last week's SDSU game. It was an hour noon. Right. I mean, I was kind of doing some stuff with the wife too, because my day, by the way, I started at USF because they are this was also the final week of Division II, so I did want to get went about as I expect, not quite as I expected, because SMSU got a touchdown right away. And then I got like 2 USF touchdowns, and I was out of there within like 15, 20 minutes, which was my goal. So I didn't miss anything significant at SDSU. But I kind of turned it on. It's kind of deja vu from what had happened with SDSU, although UND kind of prolonged it because UND got a big touchdown run right away to go up 7-0. I think USD missed a field goal. They were actually up 14-0 and had the lead at half, but similar to the SDSU game, they have the lead, and then USD goes on a big run. Now, I don't know quite how it got that close again, because I think it was 42-7 21, and then they get a couple of touchdowns and nearly apparently listening to the radio, recover an onside kick, which, I put out a tweet quoting it saying, by the way, kids, remember, receiving team can touch the onside kick at any time. It's the team that's kicking the onside kick that has to wait for it to go 10 yards.
Yep.
So a little hairy there at the end, but, as Jackrabbit fans know, the Alaris Center is a weird cauldron of weirdness. And as we discussed last week, USD had never won there. They had won in Grand Forks since 1985. So I guess it was bound to be weird. Maybe they were, again, this was also UND's senior day. And even though we kind of dismissed them as a playoff team, technically they were still alive. Because, with the 12-game schedule, a 5-loss team could get in. Especially if they beat a top 5 ranked team. They would have, in theory, had they won today and then won next week, they would have, in theory, had a very good chance, especially with, some of the stuff we've been talking about with USD being not having a quality win, maybe being a bubble team. In theory, UND was still alive, and it was their senior day. I mean, if you have any modicum of pride, you're going to play hard in that one. But just the same pattern emerged. I mean, UND's defense is just not that good. I mean, even when we, even the games they've won, they gave up a lot of points. I mean, it just, and they can't stop the bleeding. We saw SDSU go on that big run. USD went on a big run. And what was the other thing we saw last week? The SDSU passing game get really untracked. What happens in this game? I think Aiden Bauman throws a pick right away, but as the game goes on, he's throwing darts left and right. Like, not a whole lot of pressure. He throws one out of the backfield that goes for it was just, I'm gonna pull up their stat line now. But yeah, just very, like I said, I don't know quite how goofy things got at the end there. Because again, I was at that point, I'm obviously at the SDSU game, and I kind of tuned it out because I kind of made a joking tweet again. I know I tweeted this last week as SDSU was making their run. Like, how many more years did they sign Bubba for? And I did it again, kind of just showing the 14. I showed the 14-0 point, and then I showed the 42-21 and like the win graph, the win percentage graph, which just went literally, It was like here for UND, and then it went here. And I'm just like, okay. So at that point, I just I tuned it out. I saw that UND was driving, but like, okay, nothing's going to happen. They're a dead fish at this point, but they made a run at it, and at least credit them. I mean, you can't say they've completely quit, but they just don't have the defense to do anything, and they're obviously going to be sitting home. I mean, again, that doesn't speak real well for Montana, who lost there earlier this year. That I think they got up 24-3 or 24-0 in that game, and never scored again. And that's how UND won that game, and that was kind of the signature win that had everybody thinking, oh, UND could be a player this year. Well, now we're finding out Montana is just kind of a middle of the pack team. So, but yeah, I mean, I guess the one thing I will say that has made a big difference for USC this year, I keep saying UND and USD. I don't know why I'm confusing them. But Charles Pierre Jr., this was kind of a surprising one, although not really. I thought maybe Strevler had done this. He's a quarterback.
Right.
Pierre Jr. became the first USD back in the Division I era to go over 1,000 yards rushing in a season. I find that a little surprising. I mean,
that's crazy because they've been D1 for a while now.
Yeah, and that of course that includes the Great West years when they were.
Yep.
But I mean, part of me finds that surprising, part of me not, because they were kind of a spread team for so long. Really tried to be more of an up-tempo dome team, so they didn't really try to run that much. It seems like when Josh Davis came here, they started to be transitioned to a little more of a run team. I mean, I think their offensive lines have gotten a little more physical and better. You've kind of seen them mean, it fits because obviously, again, their coach just came from SDSU. You see them trying to go toward a little of that culture of what SDSU and NDSU do in terms of trying to mix in some power running and some physical offensive loss. So they never really had that before. It was more of a spread them out, like a dome team. But, to be fair, that's what SDSU kind of used to be for a while. When you go back to the Goddard, the Winnicky years, they were more of even though they were an outdoor team, they looked like more of a dome team for years on years. And that was where they made when this team made I don't know if he's going to be a head coach yet. I think it's a little early. And I don't know if he wants that job yet. That's a lot. There's a lot going on at UNI right now.
Well, and, that's what we said about USD's coordinator job at the time when he took it too.
Yeah, and I mean, I think I can't remember how long Bob's extension is for, but although I think Johansson's might be Johansson. It's either the D coordinator Johansson or maybe Davis who would be in line whenever Bob steps down. I think probably Johansson because he's been there longer. Although, unlike Jimmy, he's not an alum of the school. So you don't have quite that tie, but I know Johansson's been a very good defensive coordinator there for a while. I mean, I know Rogers spoke pretty highly of him. He's very well thought of in a lot of circles. But yeah, I mean, maybe. But right now, UNI's got a lot of issues going on with, the budget. I think the budget issue there, boy,
well, it sounds like they've got a lot of funding going for dome renovations going forwards here. So that they've.
Well, the other thing about USD is they've got the Jones family kicked in like a bunch of money to pay the offensive coordinator.
Right.
USD, it's like he might be. You almost wonder if he ends up making more as the USD offensive coordinator than he might as the head coach at UNI.
Well, I think
that could be a legitimate concern there.
It says they endowed the position, I believe.
I don't know what that means. I don't know how that works, but UNI's got, and that's something we haven't even touched on yet, and we kind of speculated a little bit last week.
Mark Farley's making $400,000 a year this year. He makes more. He's one of the highest paid coaches in the Valley.
But you would, you wonder if they're going to cut the next guy because
Farley would.
Farley was the dean of coaches.
You could cut $100,000 off and still be making almost what Jimmy does. So, that's possible.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, no, Jordan, we don't need to go into that. We don't need to
We'll get there.
Yeah. We'll get to there. We got too much playoff and fun and all that stuff going on. There was, somebody mentioned further up that they have the bubble has gotten weak or gotten soft, and I kind of gotta agree, man. Incarnate Word sure wasn't inspiring against Stephen F. Austin, and I love Rev, but I think we all know Stephen F. Austin isn't some form of juggernaut top 25 team. They're a solid team, but they're not top 25 team. So that's a tough look for a school trying to get a top 8 seed that doesn't have any real signature wins to show of. We talk about USD not having one. Incarnate Word doesn't either. They don't have any statement wins to put on there. It is interesting because it's fun listening to the conversation because we still talk about seeds and I always get the whatchamacallit, the seeds. When people are talking about the seeds, they're talking still in the fashion of a top 8 seed. Like we forget that
they're seeding 1 to 16 now.
It's 1 to 16 now. Like getting an actual seed now, it's getting a bye. Getting the bye is the
bye
real
is
key.
1
You
to
want to
8.
be a top 8 seed. But to be a top 16 team, you get home field in the first round. That's a big deal. It's going to be really fun to see how they try to. I would not want to have to work that out because once you get after, top 8-ish, top 10,
why do I have a feeling it's still going to be somewhat regionalized, especially with there just with there being maybe this year at least, just there being such a kind of a mess down
Cluster.
below.
Well,
I don't know.
Honestly, we say this every year. We're like, oh man, I don't know. 15 through 20 is always a mucky mess. And it is. It's every year. It's a murky mess because it's top 15 to 25 teams. I mean, when is that
on
really
Ivy
going
League,
to
come
be
in and
clear
join
cut?
us.
Yeah.
Please join us, Ivy League. We need you bad.
But I mean, if you think about it, what are you hoping for, in your top 25? 3 lost teams? Or, I mean, there's just not enough teams in the country in conferences to have a bunch of 3 lost teams all the way down to top 20. I think that's just the nature of it for it to be murky. And man, the arguments that are going to be popping after the committee does what it does. They've already said they will regionalize non-seeds going into 9 through 16. So if you're 9 through 16, not only do you not get to buy, but you also run the risk of getting a tougher first round opponent because of geography than you would being a top 8 seed. Because top 8 seed, you're just straight getting, you're getting the seed that you should be facing, which is the way it should be. And you know what? I don't have a problem with that, to be honest. You are already getting now, you used to not be able to get automatic home field advantage. So we finally cleared that up because honestly, that's the way it should be. And they have to keep some regionalization in it. It just is the way it is. Every NCAA tournament has a form of regionalization to it. But
this is an off topic, but I was just scanning some scores today, and this is the random one. Eastern Washington over Idaho State, 77-42.
And I think, oh God, before I say it, I gotta peek. Oh, Idaho did come back and beat Weber.
Yep, they beat Weber.
Yeah, because they were down in the third.
They're 8-3 now.
So Idaho's looking good. Montana State, UC Davis, Montana will probably make it, and possibly NAU.
NAU did win. They had Northern Colorado.
Right.
That was a gimme, but they won They went to on the road and won 44-3. So they're 7-4. I think they got back in the rankings, which
they'll have to, to finish it off, and I think to make sure they get in the playoffs.
Now they do have a division
against Eastern.
Yeah, and that is in Flagstaff. Eastern is playing better. I mean, that's undeniable. As much as we dumped on them at this, I'm almost wondering if you have to. It won't happen. But I almost wonder if you give Drake a seed at this point, as muddled as the bottom is, because now Eastern Washington looks good, relatively good. I mean, they played well. I mean, you almost want to
they've really
that
turned it
win
around.
More? I mean,
they really have truly turned it around.
There's at least some hope, I think, moving.
Yeah,
it's not. There's still a long way to go from where they were a decade ago. The heights of being a power. But man, I'm impressed because it felt like that thing was gonna crater. As we talked about, we never, the thoughts that they were gonna maybe drop the program altogether were probably overrated or overplayed. But Drake lost today. Well, yeah, I'm being a little facetious with that one because I don't think a Pioneer League team is ever going to get a seed. But no, I mean Northern Arizona. Yeah, Northern Arizona. There is one again, they aren't supposed to count the Division II wins against people. They do have one Division II win, so technically 6 FCS wins. But I think
it was Montana last year or 2 years ago. I think it was 2 years ago when they let them in, and we were convinced that the D2 was going to keep them out. Then they came out and said, no. The D2 wins count, but if it's close, then it's
right now. Northern Arizona's only losses are to Arizona, who was actually I think was or is still ranked at the time. I don't know. Incarnate Word, Montana, and Idaho. Those aren't terrible losses.
Mm-hmm.
Don't really have a great...
NAU is becoming a kind of signature or a resume building win for Incarnate Word. If you're an Incarnate Word fan, you want them to win out like nobody's business, because then you got to win against a playoff team. So,
I mean, I kind of feel like with where the bubble is right now, 7 and even if they do lose Eastern, which like I said, Eastern's playing better, so it's not a gimme, but it is in Flagstaff. 8-4, they're guaranteed. 8-4, they are a lock. I think 7-5. 7-5, I think they're in.
Yeah,
even
John said, as long as you have 7 wins, you should make it to the 24 team playoff in a regular year. This is a 12-game year.
12-game year, yeah. I think they're in. I think they're in regardless right now, but you never know. Shenanigans.
7 wins puts you in danger. Moral of the story: don't put your fate in the hands of the committee.
Yeah.
Here's
another one that's we haven't talked much about it because we've kind of dumped on the Valley. Illinois State's going to get in.
Yeah, jeez.
8-3. I mean, and I thought their season was over when they lost their running back, their stud running back.
I truly don't believe they're good. I truly do not believe they are a good football team. I do not believe they're a playoff team. I believe they're one of those teams that's going to get in and then just get absolutely roadhoused by the first seeded team they play.
The question is, are they going to be potentially one of those lower ended seeds?
They're another team. You look at them.
They don't have much of a resume, wins. I don't think. No.
North Alabama, nobody. Western Illinois, nobody. Eastern Illinois, nobody. Lost to NDSU. Southern Illinois, nobody. Lost to Missouri State. Beat Murray State. No offense, Mike, nobody.
It was 41-7 and 42-10 to Missouri State and NDSU. And I don't even know how much the Missouri State thing carries water anymore because I think in some metrics they're not even ranked. I mean, do they get ranked in the stats poll still, or
they only get ranked in the coaches poll? The committee, from things we've heard and seen, apparently it sounds like the committee has their own top 25 that they use. So how is
hopefully
that?
We'll see how they count them.
And I have been against them being ranked. If you're going to FBS, against them being ranked, but to be honest, the more this happens, you're hurting teams' resumes and making the muddy water muddy if you don't allow those teams to be ranked when they're playing an FCS conference schedule.
Well, the other thing is what happens with Missouri State if SDSU goes down there next week and just kills them, because then they got beat today 59-21. I think something like that.
Bad.
Let the Jacks go down there and beat them like 42-14 or something like that.
Missouri State had 17 yards in the first quarter.
But looking at Illinois State, I mentioned those losses. You look at their last couple of wins. I mean, they go to Indiana State today and win by 12, which, I mean, that's, Indiana State, I've said they're a little better than they have been, but still, Indiana State just got suplexed 49-0 in Vermillion. So, Indiana State, saying Indiana State's better than normal is relatively speaking, because they're still not good enough to compete with the upper echelon of the league. The other one's going to tick off Michael, but that's as close as Murray State's come to beating anybody. Murray State in Kentucky, Illinois State beat them by 8. Youngstown, they beat Youngstown by 7. They did beat Northern Iowa fairly convincingly. That was 31-9. Hammered Southern Illinois, we know, is just right now a mess. They had fairly convincing wins over Western and Eastern Illinois, but those teams are really kind of. To your point, they've got 8 wins, but they also they didn't have USD, they didn't have SDSU on the schedule.
Illinois State,
those two on the schedule, it would be a different story.
Illinois State to me is the poster child of both sides of the argument that's had about the SoCon.
About playing everybody.
They're the poster child of not playing everybody because, yes, they missed SDSU USD, and that's absolutely why they're getting in. I agree. Is that unfair? Sure, I can get on board on that. But guess what? They're also the poster child of taking care of business against the bad teams in your conference. all they did was beat everyone in the conference that was a bad team.
Can't punish them.
It's going to be good enough to get them into the playoff. If the SoCon, their top teams, took care of business against the bad teams in the conference, they'd have 3-4 bids this year.
Hey, here's the thing. SoCon might get Illinois State.
Right.
There's your chance to build a resume. SoCon,
right.
Beat the crap out, have Mercer or whoever just waylay them. And then you can use it's kind of a false data point, but you can use it to say, hey, we just kicked the crap out of a Valley team.
Blew the doors off out of Valley team. Yep.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, kudos to Brock Spack. He's kind of had a couple of rough years, and this one looked like it was heading in the wrong direction too, but he's going to be in the playoffs, and we'll see what they do with it. They should, now they got UND, and it might even be a 9-win season, no less. I mean, because they've got UND coming to town. We know how wonderful UND is on the road, and they've just been demoralized after blowing leads at home against Dakota schools, and they're done. They have no playoff shot, so it's hard for me to imagine they're going to go up there and win that game. I mean, maybe I don't know, weirder things have happened, but
yeah,
that does not feel like a good situation for. Well, I even ran into Tanner Castor on the sideline today. He was asking me, "You think Bubba's in trouble?" I'm like, he would be if he didn't sign an extension.
Right.
Oh my God, I can't believe it. Oh God, they are in trouble. That program's a mess.
Woof.
I kind of want to look up briefly here. I wonder what their future. Kind of want to see what their schedule going into next year is going to be. Just their non-conference North Dakota future football schedules. Because which is ironic because you thought this year they were set up for success when they beat Montana, and I think they were undefeated. Well, no, they lost the Boise State game. Or they lost the Iowa State game, but they look good. They look good defensively against Iowa State, who for the longest time looked like a good team. Next year. Well, they get whooping cough at home.
It'll be interesting to see if that game stays on or not, huh?
Well, it's in Grand Forks, so as long as it's not in Portland, apparently they don't. We'll see if the contagion spreads to the Dakotas.
Right.
But their first game is at Kansas State, so unless Chris Kleiman decides to go to a bigger job, do you think the former Bison coach will probably have them just jazzed enough to lay a decent beat down on UND? I'm guessing that'll happen. Yeah. They go to Kansas State, host Portland State, go to Montana, and then host Valpo. So that's a 2-2 non-conference, probably. I mean, Montana at Washington Grizzly, I don't care if the Grizz are still mid. They'll probably, again, UND on the road. That's probably a 30-point loss. Just calling it for what it is. I don't care if the Grizz are if the Grizz are mid or not. UND can't win on the road. They'll get killed. They're 2-2 unless they have a real disaster against Portland State or Valpo. Yeah. So I don't know, Bubba. Bubba's got to figure something out up there. He's got to make a change because something's not right. Something's not working up there. But the big ones next week, obviously, we know Missouri State, SDSU. I still wouldn't necessarily write Missouri State off just because it is in Springfield. Technically, they still have a shot at a share of a conference title. It's their last hurrah in the FCS. Of course, the last time they played their biggest game ever against SDSU, they got murdered.
Yep.
But Although it was a close game going to the fourth, or second half, I think. But yeah, I'm just looking at these numbers, and Barika Capina, who I know, we talk about that Marty Brown, who's been there, who could be the Jerry Rice Freshman of the Year. He went for 13, and their other back went for $1.69. So, I think the Bison ran for about, says they went for 364. So that does suggest could be a good run day. Daniel, I mean, that's something I think that's been a theme with Missouri State. They've got a very good offense, but defensively they weren't putting up very good numbers going into today. And I got to find my wording on this exactly. I find my wording on this, but I had every now and then I do have a witty comment that I get in. Because I found the NDSU game tweet. Yeah, I get the feeling the Bison seriously took the game personally. Feeling Bison seriously took the game personally. Let's capitalize the first three letters of the first three words here. Feeling Bison seriously took the game personally.
Yep.
Because I don't really, it seemed like they took their foot off the gas. In the other games, they blew people away. I think little they say envy isn't envy one of the 7 deadly sins, and in this case, I think they just decided, we envy you for going to the FBS. That's where we want to be. In this case, envy can be dropping an anvil on your head and scoring as many points as we can until the clock runs out. Because that was it really does it. I don't know. Somebody else maybe watching that game can comment, but that did not look like does not look like they any other team I think would maybe let the dogs up. They did not let the dogs up. They did not call off the dogs.
Yep. Not at all.
So, but yeah, I think it's still going to be we'll see. I don't know. I think SCSU's defense is playing at such a clip. I got a siren outside. Hopefully, hopefully nobody's. I probably don't need to go get another cup of water. I don't know why my voice is. I guess being in the Dakota Dome near the old pool does that to me every now and then. I lose my voice.
It'll do it. It'll get you.
I was cheering so hard last night watching the Rams win the bronze boot. Yeah. There's another note, NDSU. If you think you're going to replace SDSU as your primary rival with Wyoming, that ain't happening. So also we signed an 8-year deal to extend the CSU-Wyoming game once they leave. So at least one school knows, at least one set of rivals know where it's at and that you got to keep the rivalries going. So, nice to see. But, yeah, no, I think the other big one obviously will be in Vermilion. I think that
yeah.
And do I dare say, once again, although I think it's generally that case, I think most Jackrabbit fans are kind of rooting against the Bison anytime they play anybody, but it would certainly shake things up a heck of a lot more if the Coyotes can beat the Bison next week.
I don't know I don't think it shakes anything up. We've gone through.
But the interesting thing was I did listen a little more to some of because I was listening obviously for some of the FBS chatter too, but the people in Fargo are convinced that if NDSU loses that game, they'll drop down to a 3 or 4. I don't necessarily believe that, but I think they kind of ascribe to something that you had mentioned in past ones. It's like the fact that you kind of hate to see USD potentially win a game like that, but not really have that much of an effect on the seeding. I mean, I think their thought is that, they seem to think that USD potentially jumps NDSU if they win that game, which, I don't necessarily agree with that. But that's an interesting take coming from Fargo, of all places, because they've been very critical of both SDSU and USD because they scheduled the Division II game and obviously
Right.
NDSU didn't. So, yeah, I mean, that's, to me, I think that's
Well,
kind of
NDSU has
it's an interesting sign that nobody really knows what's going to happen
right.
if that plays out.
Well, and that's part of the problem with the committee as it goes right now, and
I'll be right
using
back to
a
get that
committee.
water.
Absolutely. That's the problem of using a committee over using like a BCS style system. And I love that if you don't look, Alex Kenkel puts out his CCS every week that uses a BCS style metrics to do the seating and do everything. Everything would be cut and dried, punched through there, because I don't think BCS in itself was terrible. It was the fact that you only took 2 teams. I think it works extremely well in a scenario like this where you need top 16 teams, pick a 24 team field, all that stuff. I think that would be the way to go here, because then it takes the emotion out of things. Committees tend to change as there's different iterations of the committee, and this committee values like quality losses was a thing once, and this committee's values strength of schedule. This committee values top 25 wins. This committee values no D2 games and more D1 wins. And it goes and it changes from committee to committee, which makes it really hard to project, to know what's going on. It creates a lack of transparency because these committees are all, when they get new members, then the values of the committee changes, and you don't know what those values are until that committee comes out and does it once, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, so now these guys, the ranked wins matter more, or oh, these guys, not losing to who you shouldn't, that means more, or getting a big win matters and your losses don't, or how many D1 wins you have matters, or whatever. If you had something like a BCS system that would take all that crap out of it, and all the committee does is look at what that punches out, because the BCS in itself wasn't terrible. What was terrible is you picked 2 teams and that was it. So that's my thought on that. I think if you look at it, SDSU, if USD wins, and then you line up, because otherwise you end up in the circle of chasing your tail, right? Because they beat.
Everybody's 1-1-1.
Yeah,
1-1-1.
so you can't use that. So you just have to
Y2K.
throw it out. And oh, by the way, the home team won every time. So it's not, you don't even have, oh, well, these guys won on the road, and for all intents
The
and
margin.
purposes.
The only thing that would maybe potentially change is if USD somehow beats them
blows
badly.
the doors off.
That has to be, because otherwise, if it's another 3-4 point game, you'll have had USD losing by 3 to SDSU losing by 4 to NDSU, and then if you have a similar type of score, then you're literally, home field was the difference. Because what they always say, home field's usually good for 7 points, something like that.
Well, I think they normally say home field's worth 3, but I would argue that
some of those home fields are worth way more than 3.
Yeah, like Fargo's worth a touchdown. USD, you can look at their home and away stats. It's worth probably a touchdown. Brookings probably getting to the point where you could say it's worth a touchdown as well. But yeah, it unless USD hammers them, you end up in this circle. So what do you do? Well, if you're on a committee and you're doing your job honestly, you've got to step back and go, okay, we have these things we need to look at. We've got ranking, we've got top 25 wins at the time now, all that stuff. And as it sits from the rankings we've seen, NDSU has more Division 1 wins. They have far more ranked wins because a couple of their playoff, or not playoff, out of conference games turned up roses and really came through for him. East Tennessee, although them losing might hurt that now. And Tennessee State going on a bit of a run here, that helps them. Plus with how they performed against Colorado, that looks good for them.
Wisconsin almost gave USD a little boost tonight.
Right.
Going to Oregon.
So that makes it that makes it hard for I think SDSU fans right now need to let go of the idea of getting a top 2 seed.
Probably.
You
Unless
need to let it go.
something weird happens out in Bozeman next week.
Yeah, because either NDSU loses to USD. Now, here's the only way that changes anything is USD blows them out, so they put USD over NDSU because of recency bias, and they went, oh, well, they killed them. Then they go, well, that's not going to bump SDSU up with them because recency bias, and they're going to go, oh, well, that was in Brookings, and it was really close, and.
Yeah,
so SDSU doesn't just automatically move up that chain.
The only way I could see something happening like that is, okay, it would be USD blowing out NDSU and then the Bobcats losing to Grizz. I mean, even then, there's no way I could see the committee putting Valley teams 1 and 2. I could not see that.
If the Bobcats lose to the Grizz, right? They still have an FBS win that looks pretty good now because New Mexico State just beat Washington State, who was ranked number 18 today.
Yeah. Oh wow.
And they look like they'll be.
It's not as bad. It's not nearly as bad an FBS team as it was.
As it looked like it was. So,
and again, I just don't see 2 Valley teams going 1 and 2. I mean, they've never. I don't think they've ever done. I don't think they've ever done that. I mean, even the 2 years that we've had an All Valley final, they weren't 1 and 2. I don't think, because I mean, Illinois State and NDSU. I think somebody upset somebody to make that happen, and I don't believe. I could be wrong, but I don't think. I'll just look at the brackets now.
That's what I'm looking at. I don't think they do it again. I don't think they want to see that.
Especially 2 teams. And I'm sorry, especially 2 teams from South Dakota. I don't really buy that.
It'd be one my job, but it wouldn't 2, happen. And then that was the predicted bracket from Stan Beckton.
I'm just going to the Wikipedia page here to see what let's see. So North Dakota State, New Hampshire was the number 1 seed in 2014.
Yeah. So
Illinois State was the 5.
Yeah.
Illinois State actually went on the road that year, beat Illinois State in the quarterfinals, won at Eastern Washington 59-46. And then they went to New Hampshire and won 21-18. That's how we got the All Valley final that year. And then obviously
2022 NDSU was the 3 seed. And this just proves my
Sam
point.
Houston was the 2?
Sac State.
Oh, that's right. Because Sac State had the win over my alma mater.
Because that was the year Montana State should have probably been the 3 seed. But also
I think they didn't play Montana
Sac State probably should have been the 1 seed because they had a FBS win and similar strength of schedule. FBS win. There was a lot of argument to be had for Sac State to have the 1 seed that year. But in the end, since both of those things should have been switched, you end up with the same teams facing each other in the semifinals. So who cares?
I think Sac State didn't even play Montana. That was one of those years they didn't play Montana State. So
right, and then that was the epic shootout between Sac State and Incarnate Word when it was 66-63. One of the most fun playoff games I've ever watched. Coming home and watching that game was just epic.
Like I said, if Incarnate Word
was there. And he came out after.
If Incarnate Word had played SDSU in the title game, and they nearly went to Fargo and beat the Bison again, as I was saying to our SoCon friends, if you don't want Mr. Referee to potentially make some calls against you, get that home seed, because Incarnate Word had a few calls to go against them in that game.
Oh, big time.
But as I said, if Incarnate Word had played SDSU in that title game, I think they would have made the Jacks sweat more than the Bison. I'm not saying Incarnate Word would have won the title, but the quarterback Lindsey Scott that year, he was in a better place at that point than Cam Miller was. The Bison were very beat up. Incarnate Word just runs such a, I'll use a I'll call it kinky offense, it would have been more of a challenge that year than NDSU because they were. I mean, I wasn't in Frisco, but I know enough people who were. Like even the Bison fans who weren't just the total green and gold morons. They knew what was coming. The smart ones knew what was going to happen in that game. So yeah,
I didn't have a single NDSU fan before that game say that they were going to beat us.
I mean, maybe
Dan, Sac State was undefeated
one
total.
moron, but yeah,
right. It was pretty clear on that. But
yeah, I mean,
it's possible.
The semifinal Incarnate Word played up in Fargo was great too. That was a great game. I mean, that was goodness, that was a heck of an Incarnate Word team.
If I had to project, if NDSU beats USD, I would project that SDSU gets the 3, NDSU gets the 1, Montana State gets the 2.
It could be. Yeah, that's right. No, that's right. Because that's the way they had that top 10. When the committee had their top 10, Bison were 1, MSU was 2. I don't expect that to change.
And then I would expect USD either gets like the 7 or the 8 is what I would guess in that scenario.
I could see them up to 6. Maybe 6.
I could see them up to 6. I could see Davis having a better argument to be over them. And Mercer as well. So those are 2 teams I'd probably consider possibly being over them. And of course, it depends how we lose all that stuff. But that's an educated guess. Now, in the fun scenario, USD wins, and they win tight. I don't see them blowing NDSU out at all.
No, I don't either.
But if they win, then I see it being 1 seed Montana State, 2 seed NDSU, 3 seed probably SDSU still, and then 4 seed being USD would be my guess.
In all honesty, I could see any of those being interchangeable.
Yeah,
they could be, because like I said, we've said that, but up north they think if NDSU loses, they could drop as far as 4. It's just, I think the one thing, like I said, I don't either, but we all know they think differently up there. But I think maybe the one thing to really go to right now, because we're going to have probably a couple hours next week to debate.
Yeah. And we're at an hour and a half already.
Yeah. Maybe the one thing to just briefly touch on is how do we think, because, we've talked a little about how we think the SDSU game's going to go. How do we think Bison Coyotes goes? Because last year was interesting. Obviously, they pulled the upset in Fargo. Bison they made no bones about it in the post game. They said we kind of overlooked them. Kind of thought, well, and when they went to the Dakota Dome, it was a mashing. Now the Coyotes are a much different looking team. They've played better. Bison are a different team too. I do think one interesting thing that's different, 2 potentially different things. Guy who had a great game that I know we made some light of this. Guy who really killed the Coyotes last year was Mr. Cole Payton.
Yes.
He went berserk against them. He's not there. Obviously, maybe you offset that a little bit with the way Cam Miller has played because he's been even better than he was a year ago. But I mean, I would be shocked if it's a blowout like that on either side. I'm curious to see how this goes. I really am, because
the way I see it, and I know my good buddy Taco King, Brian Thompson, was texting me after our game, and we were texting back and forth. He ended up bringing up he thinks NDSU is going to kill him. I don't know if and some of that's a knee-jerk reaction based off of how the game at UND went. I think what happened for USD at UND, they got up big in the third and completely started looking ahead to
the gas. I wouldn't be shocked if they were looking ahead a little bit, period. But
the whole time.
And again, we all say it.
What we saw happen to them at Indiana
Center,
State.
Weird.
we saw them do the same thing at Indiana State before they played SDSU. They did the same thing and ended up in a lot tighter game than they should have with Indiana State. So I think that they weren't quite locked in on that. So I do think that the their game against this last game is a bit
You're
of a
thinking
red
about
herring.
last year.
Was
I
it
think you're thinking
last year?
about
Who did they play before
they
the Jacks this year?
Yeah.
They had a bit of a.
They've been pretty.
They had a bit of a dozy
I'm gonna
game.
look that up here. Well, they've been more. Well, it was Youngstown.
Yeah, Youngstown. They only won 27-17 before that game.
In that game, it was similar to this one. I mean, because it's one of those things. Last year, they had a lot of those games where they couldn't blow anybody out. Every game, It seemed like, was pretty close, or it was close for the majority. This year, they've taken care of teams. Now, the Youngstown game directly before us, and Youngstown was another place for them, like UND. They hadn't won. They'd never won in Youngstown, but they got down 14-0 in that game, and they ended up outscoring them 27-3. So it looks closer on the board, but after they got down, they pretty much dominated. So kind of similar to today. Maybe they were looking ahead, but you saw what the game really was in the stretch where they made it pretty apparent what the better team was. Now, again, I kind of tuned out once it was 42-21, so I don't know. Like, I kind of leaned to where you were. They got up big, took their foot off the gas. Looking ahead, I don't know. But
what I was getting, I guess, what I was getting at there is similar situation. They're at a place they historically struggled. I don't think they'd ever won in Youngstown either. Excuse me. Sorry.
They never won at Youngstown.
They had never won at Youngstown. Kind of a dozy game. Let them come back in it. They were actually losing at half. Had to come back and win that game. UND game. We all know what happened today. And then they came out against the Jacks and played a hell of a game and damn near won in Brookings. Now it's at USD. Even if it's not a sellout.
Senior day too.
It's senior day. They'll still have a good crowd. I don't think it's going to be half NDSU fans. There will be a healthy amount of NDSU fans there. But NDSU doesn't quite travel like they used to. They don't. They don't fill their own dome, and they don't travel quite like they used to. They're not taking over the Dana when they come down either anymore. But there will still be a healthy amount of NDSU fans there. Just my knee-jerk reaction is USD keeps it really close. I'm tempted to say they could win. I think that their pass rush, and especially getting the cat back who wasn't available for the SDSU game, that's helpful. Yeah. Getting him back is helpful. I think Cam Miller will have more pressure on him than he's used to in this game. That's funny, Garrett. I very much could see USD pulling off the upset with it being at home.
I could as well.
And as of right now, I'm kind of leaning that way. Then again, NDSU looks like a machine right now. But I do think USD has the defense to slow them down. I think USD has a very comparable defense to SDSU, and SDSU defense sure slowed down NDSU's offense. If, like people are saying, like Garrett said, if NDSU jumps up 14-0 or 10-0, then
I can't get down the way they did.
A blowout. I don't see that happening. If USD gets some plays and gets some juice in that dome right away, I think they'll pull it out. But if NDSU jumps on right away, it's going to be here we go again, and then they're going to. I think they could get cooked.
It's kind of interesting because we're talking about the games last year. I forget the last time they played the Bison in a regular season game, 2022, which was their 3-win team. USD led that game at half, 17-10 with Carson Camp, and they're bad. I mean, they were in that game the whole way. Bison ended up shutting him out in the second half, but it was still a 7. I mean, Bison led by 7 going to the fourth. I mean, that was a tough. So even And at that point, I think you want to talk about it being 50-50 NDSU. I mean, I don't know if there was that much of a crowd that day. The attendance for that game was 6,500. So, you want to talk about a game where there probably were more Bison fans, or there wasn't much energy. Again, that team at that point, USD was 1-3, and I think that was right after they had just gotten. No, it was right before they just. The next week they went down and got hammered at SDSU. So, I mean, there have been times where even when there's not a whole lot of people in that dome, they've managed to your point, they played better at home. And I looked this up while you were talking, kind of a similar streak that they've had. They have not beaten the Bison in Vermillion since 2002. It's been a long time. Their last victory, 2002, was the last time they played in Division II. They beat them in 4 overtimes, 40-37. So, and of course, they've had some back in the 80s, they had some battles in the playoffs. But, I mean, I'm a little wondering about how the fan thing's going to work out, because just the fact that they haven't sold those, I don't know what's going on there. I mean, it's just, we've talked so much about.
Not even 10,000 tickets. Jesus Christ.
How do you not get those 1,000?
It's a tiny dome. It's not that it's not sold out. It's that it's a small stadium and it's not sold out.
It's not even a small. It's like the game.
It's small, even by FCS standards.
I mean, just the stakes of the game, but you've got a good team. This is a championship contender. I mean, were you that put off by losing to SDSU in a game that you nearly won? It'd be one thing if they'd been blown out by SDSU and you're thinking, oh, this team's a fraud. Okay, I guess I could maybe kind of understand that sentiment, but it's like, oh yeah, a little different there. But I get some of the sentiment, but
a little bit of a jab.
Yeah, more like an uppercut. But no, beyond just the stakes and the size. I mean, it's like you've got a good team. This is their senior day, and I don't think people realize how bad things were in 2022. And a lot of people, there were people who left that program, like their best receiver. We talked about Camp, who left, although Bauman had kind of supplanted him by that point anyway. But like their best receiver had left. He transferred to UND. They lost a lot of people off that team. There were the guys who are seniors now could have left for probably better places, or certainly seemed like better places at that time. I mean, if you're an actual fan, you kind of owe it to them to be there and give them that send-off. I mean, we talk about what is senior day. I mean, in theory, we think they're going to get at least one more home game, but you owe it to them to at least fill that place for everything they did to bring that program back from the abyss. So, and oh, by the way, the stakes are that high. You could, if you win this game, you win a share of the conference title. End story. You win a conference title if you win this game.
Yep.
So, yeah, I mean, it's just, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, and I see Daniel's comment with Zimmer. I've been talking with some USC fans this week who I mean, there are diehards there. Every fan base has them. We said it earlier in this show. Every fan base has its issues. That one has some. I don't know. I mean, it's worse in basketball, obviously. They made a very interesting decision that I think is going to I hope they reverse, to move their student section, which just does not look good, because now those end zones behind the baskets are not the student section there anymore. And that's not going to go well if they don't change that decision. That was a bad decision.
Zim,
off topic.
Jesus, I was reading the comment, and as I said that, yeah, well, Borg, it is an hour and 40 minutes. Yep. I have to mention our last sponsor, Cubby Sports Bar and Grill in downtown Brookings, the best sports bar in the state of South Dakota, in my humble opinion. Obviously not biased at all, but Cubby Sports Bar and Grill, the best place to go for beer, Chislic, food, and more. They're famous for their different types of nachos they have. Someday they'll bring back the J Italian nachos, but until that day, they also have fantastic food. Get down to Cubby Sports Bar and Grill. They are the place to go to watch Jack's games, home or away. If the stadium's sold out, go down to Cubby's and check it out.
Shout out, by the way, the women's soccer team went to Cubby's for the watch party on Monday. Of course, Cubby's is usually the home for, I think, pretty much every NCAA selection show for non-football teams. Obviously, whenever a Jackrabbit team makes the NCAA, the regular tournaments, not the FCS, it'd be a little hard to fit the football team in Cubby's altogether.
Right.
Although if you're like my football team, my alma mater, we won the bronze boot, and our coach took us to our version of Cubby's. It's a place called Lucky Joe's in Fort Collins. I retweeted this video. Locker room right when he broke them down, he said, "We're taking this to Lucky Joe's." And sure enough, the official athletic account posted the coach, the players, the athletic director walking into that bar, my favorite bar. And I'm like, I'm still not entirely sold on this guy because we're kind of the Illinois state of our conference. I don't know that we've actually beaten anybody. But by God, you get it, dude. You took the bronze mother effing boot to the best college bar in town. You sang the fight song and you were hanging. I mean, that is a code. I hope that dude freaking turns us into a power because he freaking gets it. Like, good God. That'd be like take the Dakota Mark. Here's the thing, Jimmy, because I know Jimmy Rogers is watching this show. I hope. And I know you listen to me because, clearly I know everything I'm talking about with football here. Here's the thing, Jimmy. Take the Dakota Marker to Cubbies next year. Or the national title. Or the national title trophy after you beat the Bison this year. Maybe slightly mention there. Take the Dakota Marker to Cubbies next year. Afterward, you and a couple guys. I don't think you'll get in trouble. I don't know if Norvell is going to get in trouble, but that would be so damn cool. I'm awesome. Very envious of that. I'm like, that's something I always, politely. You got last to leave. What did you do? How drunk were you?
Drunk enough, apparently.
Kicked out of Lucky Joe's. My God. Well, either way, my favorite all-time bar. Still a little pissed at my wife. She wouldn't let me take her to it a few years ago. I showed her that video today. I'm like, really? It was good enough for our football team. Wasn't good enough for you. Okay. Well, you can get very drunk in Fort Collins. There are more breweries per capita than people, I think, or something along that line. Win or lose, we booze, and we're actually winning this year. So, there was a place that made margaritas called the Rio where they had a 3 margarita limit because it's that. Apparently, they were that alcohol fueled, and a buddy of mine had more than 3, and we were carrying him around the streets because he couldn't walk. So
that's amazing.
Yeah, he had like 5, and he thought he was going to die. But Fort Collins is, just a little reference for you Bison fans or anybody, because maybe you guys are going to be members of the Mountain West here, and because we will be wrapping this up very soon, because God knows what next week's podcast is going to be like. You're losing the best parts if you go to the Mountain West. Hopefully, if they do invite CSU and NDSU, you guys can make something together. Because man, losing Boise, losing SDSU, losing San Diego, the Mountain West. They're still. I mean, you're still gonna have Vegas, so still got Vegas. Airport. I kind of like New Mexico. Albuquerque's not the worst. But man, it's just the Mountain West is it's not Conference USA. It's better than Conference USA.
Yeah.
It's probably the best option, as we'll touch on this again briefly before we call it a night. The only real update, there's really not much.
Nothing.
Well, and that also, again, makes you wonder how much there actually is to this, because usually when there is a rumor, more people are picking up on it and pinballing it.
Yep.
And right now it was only McMurphy tweeting. And McMurphy's had his misses too. He's had his hits, but conference realignment's a very fluid deal. But, and you and I talked about this privately, but, I think the one thing McMurphy said, because he went on Izzo's show last week, and I think he didn't really talk about, Dom didn't really go too much on this. He was kind of focused on the NDSU part of it, and it was toward the end of the interview. But they tried to get an idea of, well, what's the timeline of when this could happen? And McMurphy kind of pointed out that, well, it kind of depends on, Pac-12 still floating out there. Pac-12 needs another member. Because again, this is what a lot of it's driven by. They need to get to a certain amount of teams, even out the conference schedule. His point is it probably won't happen until the spring. So, number one, Fargo's going to combust because they're losing their minds over this right now anyway. They want it to happen tomorrow. But number two, that makes perfect sense because I think the Pac-12 is probably dictating a lot of what the Mountain West is going to do. Because you got to wait and see what – neither knows what their media rights deal is going to look like because that's still up in the air. Once the Pac-12 gets that, then I think they can figure out what direction do we go for our next member. It's almost certainly going to be back to the AAC. Memphis basically said when they reaffirmed their commitment, their athletic director basically said, make us a better offer. If their deal is reasonably good, then I think they're going to go after Memphis. They might go after more than one. But there's a very good chance they could also go back and try and raid the Mountain West again. Or if the Mountain West, or if they take Memphis or a couple more AAC schools, the AAC might backfill and try and bring in Las Vegas or Air Force or whoever. So I think whatever happens with the Pac-12 could definitely is going to be the template for what happens in the Mountain West. And we still don't know that Northern Illinois and Toledo they still haven't said no. That's the other half of it. Because I think they're waiting because the Mountain West deal as of right now is much better than the MAC deal. Even McMurphy admitted that. It is, even though the MAC deal has the name brand and the Maction and the crazy days, I think the Mountain West deal is I don't have the exact number. It's much more lucrative. So now but again, what is that deal going to look like when you've just cut the guts of the league out? Nobody knows. So it's going to take more time. Now, where does that place SDSU? Again, McMurphy said as of right now, he's only heard NDSU. But what happens if more teams what happens if the Mountain West loses more teams? Then they're going to need more people, And then the other half of it is they were inviting Toledo and NIU. Why did they, another question I would have liked to ask is, well, why were they packaging Toledo and NIU? But then if they don't get in, you're only doing the one with India. Why wouldn't you want to do two why would you only invite one when you originally wanted to do two with Toledo and NIU? Point is, I don't think, you never know with realignment. It happens in a blink. And, as much as I think Dom and McFeely and Kolpak really, their biggest wish in life would be to break the story, it'll happen like a bomb whenever it happens. No one will see it coming because these things, it just always does. Yeah, the Mountain West is, but I don't think it's going to be resolved until spring. Until the Pac-12 does something, I don't know that the Mountain West can do anything. And I'm still not sure that the Mountain West could still implode if enough teams get gutted. So I just don't know what that McMurphy, again, we're not really in a different place than we were a week ago. It's still just kind of speculation at this point because nothing's happened. Really, nothing has happened.
Yeah. And that's the long and short of it. Nothing's happened. It's hurry up and wait. It's the most hurry up and wait thing on the planet, I think. When it happens, all of a sudden everything happens, and then nothing happens.
I will say I think the best thing about it is that if it goes on a while, again, other than the fact it's kind of fun to watch Fargo squirm, I'm not necessarily looking forward to McFeely doing a touchdown dance if it's only NDSU, because he's made it clear he's going to go scorched earth on people. I guess he kind of deserves it. I don't think anybody ever said NDSU didn't deserve to go up to FBS. It's just, again, I don't think anybody ever, it was never realistic from the standpoint, I think, of being an all sports move, because I just don't know if the budget works when it's all sports. And the football only.
Here's the thing with the budget thing. Nobody moves up to the FBS with an FBS ready budget. That's just reality. They just don't. No school does. JMU's pumped up their budget, and they had the biggest budget in FCS when they were there.
Well,
and it is. Are they capable of getting their budget up there? Well, I don't see SDSU or NDSU, when it comes to budget, agreeing to move up if they don't think they can get competitive with their budget.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm not so much talking about the budget. It's just I think it's the difficulties that they're going to have in terms of the geographical fit, conferences where you have to, again, you're going to have to fly all your non-revenue programs. Like I said, Missouri State and Conference USA, some of these leagues make a little more sense. The Mountain West would have made a little more sense in all sports, but it's still, I mean, it.
Well, how many Summit teams can you bust to? You've got NDSU, UND, USD, St. Thomas, and Omaha, right? That's
a lot more than you got in the Mountain West right now.
Absolutely, right. Yeah. Oh, that's no doubt. But you're still flying a fair amount.
Yeah. And, but
football-wise, you're flying a lot.
Well, I think the main point that I'll make here is that to get a football-only invite was previously impossible. It had never been offered to an FCS school.
Right.
Only established FBS schools, and mostly it had been just Hawaii and service academies that had ever gotten it. So it took a ton of unforeseen circumstances for this to potentially happen. It took the Pac-12 imploding and then reemerging, and then the Mountain West having apparently several targets say no for this to be a possibility. So, yeah, I understand that people up there will do a touchdown dance if NDSU got invited alone and said goodbye to SDSU, but whatever. I mean, there's no way anybody predicted that circumstance happening. But nobody ever said that the Bison wouldn't be competitive or wouldn't be a fit for FBS. Again, the factors were all there. We all knew the factors. Geography. This has been all about market size for a lot of these people. Just finally it took what I've said, and I think what we've all said is, hey, eventually this probably will happen. It's just going to take time. It may not take as much time as we thought. We'll see. And we still don't know that it's going to happen. But I think the best thing that maybe happens for this, if it does stretch on longer, is that you do get more time now. It's giving Justin Sell, my guess is Justin Sell has had a few conversations with the right people by now that we don't know of. That's just my hunch. I'm sure the same has happened up north. This gives, if SDSU is not in position right now and they feel like NDSU is moving toward getting one, but it's probably not going to happen until, let's say, May. Justin Sell has about, 6 months to really make a pretty strong case for, hey, you kind of need us too. It'd be a pretty good ad. So, like I said, if it's going to happen, and it may still not happen, I've even heard rumors that this is just, maybe McMurphy was just kind of shooting from the hip. But, it's kind of fun talk. I think that's the nice part about down here is we're still keeping our Midwest sensibility. I think they've kind of lost all their sensibility up north. So we can keep our wits about us. But, I'll tell you this, whenever it happens, it's going to go off like a bomb and we will not be expecting it. And it'll just be, hey, they're going to the FBS. Or, it may happen this year, maybe happen next year, it may happen 10 years, may happen 20 years. It'll happen whenever it happens. Ain't nobody going to see it coming.
That's a fact. Well, we have almost reached 2 hours. It is time for me
It is
to go
time
to
to
bed.
shut down.
So we will
Recover my voice from when we do like 4 hours next week is half
God.
of the FCS melts down trying to figure
Right.
out their
I'm gonna have
seeding.
to figure out how I'm doing that because I am going to Missouri State for that game. So I will
Oh,
be
nice.
figuring out a way to do that because we'll want to get in before the Fans Nation guys have their big pod on Sunday, their live pod and everything for the playoffs. So
Well,
I will figure
yeah.
out a way to
At least the
set up
selection show's not on
down
my
there.
anniversary again. That was a little bit of an adventure last year.
Oh, I bet. God, I bet.
I took my wife up to the selection show, and Jimmy, I think I now understood a lot of my problems in life. And on that note, have a great week, everyone.
Take her easy, everybody.